Through you, Mr. Chair, I can confirm it's 4 p.m. and we're now live streaming and recording.
Thank you, Ms. Leach. I will call this meeting to order. It is the June 5th Committee of Adjustment for the Town of Pelham. Quorum is present, and I'd ask that Ms. Leach, we begin with a reading of the land recognition statement.
We begin this meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. The territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and the friendships of the Indigenous peoples. Through Mr. Chair, you may now proceed with your introduction.
Thank you, Ms. Leach. There's three members with the committee today. To the left here is Ms. Stan, Member Stan, and to the right is Member Kappa. I'm Isaiah Bannock, the chair of the committee. We also have some staff here as well. There's Ms. Sarah Leach, our secretary-treasurer, and we have planning staff as well sitting on the side of the room there. Also online is Mr. Derek Young, our engineering manager. Just a few opening statements before we proceed through the agenda. This is a hybrid hearing of the Committee of Adjustment for the Town of Pelham. Everyone present and viewing at home via live stream will be given an opportunity to comment on the applications being heard. Agencies commenting on applications may request that certain conditions be imposed should an application be approved. Voicing objections to these conditions will not adversely affect the committee's decision. The purpose of the application relative correspondence will be heard, following which the applicant will be given an opportunity to address the application. During the public portion of each application, we will hear from anyone wishing to submit comments or submit a written comment via email to clerks@pelham.ca. The email address is clerks with an S @pelham.ca. Comments received following the public portion will not be considered. At the conclusion of the discussion, the committee will render a decision and advise of any applicable conditions. Specific wording for conditions may be determined by the committee following the hearing. Copies of decisions will be mailed to the applicant or agent and members of the public that have submitted comments. Notices of decision can also be obtained by request to the Secretary-Treasurer. Committee members are asked to raise your hand if you would like to speak and vote. Applicants, agents, and attendees are advised that they're free to leave the webinar or the room once a decision has been made on their application. Moving to the next item on our agenda, I'm looking for a motion to approve our agenda.
I approve.
I second that motion.
Thank you. Do any members of this panel have a pecuniary interest in accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act in any of the applications to be considered at this hearing?
I do not.
I do not as well.
And I do not have any as well. Ms. Leach, are there any requests for withdrawal or adjournment?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there has not been.
Okay, thank you. All right, we are ready to move to the first application, and the first matter on our agenda is the consent cancellation as it relates to 1161 Pelham Street. This is file B3/2015P. Ms. Leach, are we prepared to go to a vote on this, or are there steps before that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if the committee has any questions, there is representation here today. If not, then you may proceed to a vote.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant from the committee? Does it look like it? Okay. Are we ready for any motion?
And through you, Mr. Chair, I'd be looking for a motion to grant the cancellation of file B3/2015P 1161 Pelham Street.
Go ahead.
Thanks.
I grant the motion to, for the consent cancellation, B3 2015P 1161 Pelham Street.
And I second that motion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Through Mr. Chair, our next application this afternoon is B7/2023P, and I will now share our presentation. Committee of Adjustment hearing Monday, June 5th, 2023 at 4 p.m. The Town of Pelham is holding hybrid Committee of Adjustment hearings. A hybrid hearing involves a mixture of in-person and remote attendance and participation. The following presentations are based upon the Town of Pelham's Planning Department report and analysis. Please note that no decisions have been made prior to this hearing. All comments from commenting agencies and the public have been forwarded in full to the Committee of Adjustment members for their consideration and will appear summarized on the slides to follow. If participating virtually, please ensure your background is free from offensive or vulgar material. If either is visible, you'll be removed from the meeting. If participating virtually, please be reminded of your background noise. If you're not speaking, it's recommended that you mute yourself. Virtual participants will remain in the waiting room until they are called to speak. Once your comments have been heard by the chair, you'll be placed back into the waiting room. Inappropriate language will not be tolerated. If inappropriate language is used, you'll be removed from the meeting. The Zoom chat is not monitored nor recommended to contact the Clerk's Department in this meeting. Please contact us using the email clerks@pelham.ca. We will be checking this email address during the meeting. Decorum. The Committee of Adjustment is a formal public hearing requiring decorum. This means that all comments are to be made through the chair. If you have pre-registered to speak virtually or are participating in person, you'll be given the opportunity to address the committee at the public portion of the meeting. If you're live streaming and wish to submit a comment live, please use the clerks@pelham.ca email address. Please note that comments must be received during the public portion of the meeting, otherwise they will not be considered. Inappropriate comments will also not be tolerated. Please note that if decorum is lost, the meeting may be recessed and persons asked to leave. To allow for an efficient meeting, each member of the public will be given the opportunity to speak to the committee during the public portion of the meeting. After all members of the public have been given the opportunity to speak, the applicant or agent may address the public comments and concerns at one time. Our first application this evening is B7/2023P 1440 Pelham Street. The subject parcel is a parcel of land lying on the west side of Pelham Street, known locally as 1440 Pelham Street. Application is made for consent to establish an easement for underground utilities in favor of Bell Canada. They intend to service the existing building at 1450 Pelham Street from the existing conduit located at 1440 Pelham Street. To date, the following comments have been received. From the Building Department, no comments. Public Works, no comments. No public comments were received at the time of writing this report. The proposed easement is to facilitate an underground utility easement in favor of Bell Canada to feed the building at 1450 Pelham Street from the existing conduit. The proposed easement is intended to include access for maintenance purposes of the below-grade services and is intended in perpetuity. Planning staff recommend that application B7/2023P be approved, subject to the following conditions. That the Secretary-Treasurer be provided with a registrable legal description of the subject parcel, together with a copy of the deposited reference plan, if applicable, for use in the issuance of the certificate of consent. That final certification fee of $423 be payable to the Treasurer, Town of Pelham, be submitted to the Secretary-Treasurer. All costs associated with fulfilling conditions of consent shall be borne by the applicant. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the Secretary-Treasurer in writing as soon as possible. Sarah Leach at sleach@pelham.ca, 20 Pelham Town Square, P.O. Box 400, Font Hill, Ontario, LOS 1EO.
Thank you, Ms. Leach. We now invite any representatives on behalf of the applicant if they would like to comment on this.
Mr. Chairman and members of the Committee of Adjustments, we would like to go forward with the application as to your vote, and we have no further comments to make on our application.
Thank you. Ms. Leach, do we have anybody pre-registered to speak on Zoom?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do not have any pre-registered members of the public. However, I will open it up to the floor. If there's anyone here in person that would like to make verbal comments, now would be the time. Seeing none, I will just confirm that we've received no emails. And through you, Mr. Chair, it is 4:08 p.m., and I can confirm that we've received no public comments, and you may now close the public portion and move to committee input.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to close the public portion of the meeting?
Yes, I move to close the public portion.
And I second that motion.
Thank you. So the public portion of the meeting is now closed. Any comments or questions from members?
I have no questions.
No, right, thanks.
No comments or questions from me either. Are we ready to render a decision?
Motion to grant?
I think your mic may be off there.
Yes, I motion to grant the motion. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would just be looking for reasons for that motion as well as a seconder.
So I move to grant the motion here in this case. The above decision is subject to the following conditions. To the satisfaction of the Secretary-Treasurer, provide the Secretary-Treasurer with a registrable legal description, copy of the deposited reference plan, and number 2, the final certification fee of $423 be provided. The decision is based on the following reasons. The application conforms to and complies with the town official plan, regional policy plan, and provincial policy statement, and the town zoning bylaw. This decision is rendered having regard to sections 5124, 5125 of the Planning Act. The committee considered all written and oral submissions and finds that, subject to the conditions, this application meets Planning Act criteria, is consistent and complies with provincial, regional, and town planning policies.
Thank you, and I'd be looking for a seconder for that motion.
I second that motion.
Thank you. And for the vote?
Yes, Ms. Leach, vote on the motion. I'll move it.
Oh, no, we do have a mover and a seconder. I'm just looking for a vote in the affirmative.
Yes.
For all,
Thank
yes?
you.
Yes.
Thank you. That vote carries, and that brings us to our next application this evening, which is B10/2022P, and I will now share our presentation.
Thank you.
Application B10/2022P, 105 Welland Road. The subject parcel is on the northwest corner of Pelham Street and Welland Road, known locally as 105 Welland Road. Application is made for consent to partial discharge of mortgage and consent to convey 3893.15 square meters of land, being Part 2 for future residential use. Part 1 is to be retained for continued use of Concordia Lutheran Church. Part 2 is currently subject to a Planning Act application for zoning bylaw amendment, Town File AM 07-2022. To date, the following comments have been received. From the Building Division, no comments. Public Works Department requests further information and clarification regarding stormwater management design. It is noted, however, that these details will be required as part of the site plan approval and are not necessary for the lot creation. See conditions. To date, the following comments have been received. 18 public comments were received at the time of writing this report. Staff note that some of the concerns raised by residents are primarily associated with the concurrent zoning bylaw amendment application, recognizing that although the two applications are separate processes under the Planning Act and are to be reviewed on their own merits, a summary of the comments and responses are provided below. Concerns regarding traffic hazards and the potential for vehicular conflict with an additional entrance on Welland Road. Response, and this is from the Planning Department. The traffic impacts study submitted with the zoning bylaw amendment application found the proposed side residential driveway will operate with reserved capacity, and the existing roadway system has surplus capacity to accommodate the proposed growth. Concerns relating to privacy. Response, to be evaluated at the time of the recommendation report for the zoning bylaw amendment that will be brought forward to council. Concerns related to drainage and potential flooding issues. Response, grading and drainage matters are addressed as part of the site plan approval process that is still required. Concerns relating to the character of the neighborhood. Response, staff note that the neighborhood is comprised of a mix of low to medium density housing as well as commercial and institutional development. Neighborhood character does not necessitate that all land uses must be the same as what is existing. Embracing a diverse range of land uses can contribute positively to the overall character and vitality of the neighborhood. Although the subject application for consent is associated with concurrent zoning bylaw amendment file AM 07-2022, the application for consent must be reviewed on its own merits. Sorry. Based on the analysis in the sections above, planning staff is of the opinion that the proposed consent is consistent with the PPS and conforms to local plans. The proposed consent will provide opportunity to make efficient use of the land and infrastructure, and ultimately the proposal will contribute towards increasing housing choice and contribute to the development of a complete community. Additional matters regarding the proposed residential development will be addressed through other planning approvals that are not before the Committee of Adjustment this evening, for example, the zoning bylaw amendment and site plan approval process. Planning staff recommend that application number B10/2022P be approved, subject to the following conditions. That the applicant obtain site plan approval for the relocated parking and entrance, grading and drainage and landscaping improvements / requirements on Part 1. That the applicant obtain a driveway entrance permit approval through Public Works. All associated costs with this permit are the responsibility of the owner. That the applicant confirm no utilities currently cross the proposed new lot line. Should any services cross this new property line, the applicant will be responsible for costs associated with the relocation and removal. That the applicant install sanitary and water service connections for Part 2 at the owner's expense and obtain a temporary works permit approval from Public Works prior to commencing work. That the applicant conduct a Stage 1/2 archaeological assessment prepared by a licensed archaeologist and receive clearance from the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, and Culture. That the applicant sign the town's standard memorandum of understanding explaining that development charges and cash in lieu of the dedication for park purposes are required prior to the issuance of the building permit. That the Secretary Treasurer be provided a registerable legal description of the subject parcel together with a copy of the deposited reference plan, if applicable, for use in the issuance of the certificate of consent. And that final certification fee of $423 payable to the Treasurer, Town of Pelham, be submitted to the Secretary Treasurer. All costs associated with fulfilling conditions of consent shall be borne by the applicant. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the Secretary Treasurer in writing as soon as possible. Sarah Leach, Secretary Treasurer to the Town of Pelham, sleach@pelham.ca. And to clarify, if anyone here has submitted written comments, you will automatically receive the notice of decision, so there's no need to sign up. Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, I do believe we have the representation with us today.
Thank you, and I will invite them in a moment to come forward. I see there's a bit of a crowd in the audience, so I just wish to clarify the process. So we will hear from the applicant. We will hear from everybody that wishes to speak to this matter, and we look forward to hearing the views of the community on this. It is important that we speak to what is before us today. What's before us is whether or not to divide the property as suggested by the applicant, whether to sever the property to create an additional parcel. So that's what this committee has the jurisdiction to assess. That's what we will be looking at, whether or not this application meets the tests under the Planning Act to have a consent to divide the property. So with that, I will invite representatives from the applicant to come forward and speak to this.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, members of staff, and ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rocky Vaca. I'm a partner at the law firm Sullivan Manny, and I appear on behalf of the applicant and owner of the property, the Board of Concordia Lutheran Church. In attendance on behalf of the board is Reg Sonnenberg and Andrew Korchuk. I also have with me Mr. William Hycoop of Upper Canada Consultants, who is the land use planning consultant for the applicant. I'd like to make some brief remarks, and then I'm going to hand it over to William to deal with the planning merits in more detail. First of all, we have read the comprehensive recommendation report prepared by the town's planning department, and we accept the report along with each and every recommended condition on the report. Second of all, as is referenced a number of times in the recommendation report, and as referenced by you, Mr. Chair, the matter before you today is an application for lot creation under Section 53 of the Planning Act, to which the applicable planning policies and test under Section 51, subsection 24 of the Act are to be applied. What may or may not be built on the lot and what the ultimate land use and density of that use may or may not be is not before you. Those matters remain to be addressed and will be addressed in the future through separate applications. Again, respectfully, your sole task today is to determine whether a lot ought to be created pursuant to the applicable planning policies. Nothing more, nothing less. For today's purposes, you have before you a recommendation report recommending approval, together with no agency or department comments which are opposed to the approval. You also have before you 18 written submissions from the public opposed to the application. Mr. Hycoop will deal with those comments in more detail, but in short, the comments for the most part are respectfully irrelevant to the severance application before you today, but will be relevant on any future land use applications. As well, in respect of the assertion that if the severance is approved, a traffic hazard will result, given its location on a curve or a hill. A traffic impact study has already been completed. It's been submitted to the town as part of the rezoning application, and the conclusion that was reached and has been accepted by the town's Public Works Department is that there will be no traffic hazard. I now pass it on to Mr. Hycoop, who will deal with the planning merits in more detail, and once he's concluded, we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Rocky. I'm just have a brief PowerPoint that I'm going to get up here. Sorry about that. Thanks, Rocky. As noted, my name's William Hycoop. I'm a planner with Upper Canada Consultants and am representing the church this evening as it relates to the consent application for 105 Welland Road. As noted, the property is municipally known as 105 Welland Road. It is currently home of the Concordia Church, who worship in the existing facility shown here. The property is fairly large in comparison to the church building and is currently oversized for their needs. So the intent of this application is to dispose of a portion of the property and with the hope of generating and sustaining the church and the church future outlook moving forward. So to provide an overview of the subject lands, they're about 2 acres in size and are located at the corner of Pelham Street and Arterial Road and Welland Road, which is also a collector road. So this is the main southerly intersection of Font Hill and I would say generally is the gateway into South Font Hill. As noted, their lands are currently used by the church. Here you can see the proposed severed portion on the west side or the left-hand side of the dashed yellow line, and the existing church, which is to be retained for continued operation, is on the right-hand side or the easterly side of the property. To the north, we have single detached dwellings. To the west is street townhouse dwellings. To the east is Pelham Street and single detached dwellings beyond. To the south, we have residential block townhouses, as well as a commercial property with a convenience store, gas station, as well as several other medical uses. And those properties have more recently developed over the last couple of years, and this is certainly an area in transition with development. So now I'd like to take a brief moment to review the existing planning context. As you can see here, the subject lands are in the urban living area or the built boundary designation of the official plan. This permits quite a range of uses, but includes residential, institutional, commercial. The lands are currently zoned as institutional as well. This was updated through the new comprehensive zoning bylaw in 2022 and includes new residential and institutional provisions. In general, the application before you tonight seeks to facilitate future development, which both the PPS growth plan and also the regional official plan discuss and support the infilling and intensifications in existing urban areas. Here you can see the proposed severance sketch outline the overall property in red, but you can see the proposed severance line down the middle in dashed. On the right-hand side, we have part one, which is the existing church property, which is to be retained. That's just over 1 acre in size. And then part two, the severed portion, is to be sold for future development purposes and is just under 1 acre in size. Essentially, the property is split in half, and that line is based on the side yard setback to the existing building. In terms of the conditions of approval, I want to be clear that we understand there's a requirement for a site plan application and ultimately site plan approval before any type of construction works can be completed. Secondly, the driveway entrance permit is also required. There's utility servicing and works permit requirements, a stage 1-2 archaeological assessment. That's actually been completed, and we have a report. We're just waiting on the ministry clearance for that. There's an MOU for DCs and park dedication, we understand that, and there's a legal description certification fee. So we are good with those conditions and understand those requirements. Just in conclusion, we acknowledge the public and agency comments and town comments, and I want to be specific. Again, I know Rocky brought up the traffic report. We had RVA traffic engineer review the property and complete the traffic report. They have no issues with the sight lines of the driveways coming out and have reviewed the capacity. So they did trip generation and understanding the existing vehicle counts on Welland Road and Pelham Street, the capacity of the existing traffic light, and their conclusion is that the site can accommodate future development. In regards to the stormwater management comments from Public Works, we fully acknowledge that we will have to do what's called pre to post development storm controls. So that essentially means that we have to limit the flows coming off the site after the development to what the flows are on site today. So there is an existing catch basin in the southeast corner of the church property. So those will certainly have existing flows going to them. So we need to control the stormwater, do some storage, and let the water out at the same rate that it is currently being let out today. So further, just acknowledge the conditions of approval, and I went through that already. And then lastly, just want to conclude that we agree with the staff recommendation report, the assumptions I should say there has been a lot of discussion about the future development. Obviously, we've had a public meeting, and I think we've noted this a couple of times, but we're here for the severance. The land use is part of an ongoing process. So that concludes my presentation. And as indicated, I'm certainly here to answer any questions or concerns you may have on the proposal before you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vaca, Mr. Haiku. Are there any questions for the applicant's representatives from the committee here?
Not at this time, not for me.
Yeah, I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next part of our meeting will be a public portion of the meeting where we will invite people to provide their comments to us. We have, of course, reviewed the comments, received the written comments as part of our package as well. Is there anyone who has, Ms. Leach, is there anyone who has pre-registered to speak via Zoom?
Yes, through Mr. Chair, before we do open up to the gallery, we have 2 members of the public which have pre-registered. With that being said, I will invite Mr. Whitelaw to the podium. And for those that are speaking this evening, there is a microphone on the podium. If you could please press the on button, the microphone will turn red, and that means that you're on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of Committee of Adjustment. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, sir. Could you start with your name, please?
I was just
for the
going to
record?
say, sorry,
Yes,
my name
thank
is
you.
Brad Whitelaw, and I'm here as both a concerned resident as well as speaking on behalf of a number of the residents within the area that are either were unable to attend the meeting in person or virtually due to work commitments or family commitments that just couldn't be, but have asked me if I could speak to you on their behalf as well. So these comments are phrased in, excuse me, on behalf of all the residents in this subdivision. As Ms. Leach had mentioned, a lot of our comments are pertaining to that, but the comments that we're focusing on with this group here are pertaining to those that the Committee of Adjustment needs to consider, which is basically pertaining to the Town of Pelham's official plan and how this development does not meet those concerns that we have, specifically Section 5, subdivision of land, subsection D5-2, new lots by consent, Part A, subsections 2, goals and objectives, and subsections 2.3, urban character. As Ms. Leach had mentioned in the amendment that's going through, some of those have been addressed, but again, we still want to reiterate to the Committee of Adjustment the concerns that we have, and these need to be really taken into consideration before you pass your motion on this. With regards to the traffic study that the proposed consultant has mentioned on this development, as residents who live in this area there, even without an existing development that's being proposed for that, there's already a number of traffic concerns. We have everything from blind curves and that, as well as near misses in accidents there, a lot of safety concerns that have been raised by residents that live in this area, not only this area, but adjacent streets that egress and ingress into this area there. The concern that residents have with the proposed development, which I realize is separate to that, but whatever development is going in on that property there, is that will just exacerbate an already existing issue that has not been fully addressed there. So when you're looking at section 5.2.1, the general criteria, B says will not cause a traffic hazard as a result of the location on a curve or a hill. This does, as it is on a curve and can cause serious concerns. So which is what we're saying is it could create a public hazard with the driving public on Welland Road due to the sightline visibility. And what we're saying to the committee is we don't want to exacerbate an already existing issue. There's already a total of 6, or would be 6 egress points coming from Pelham Street straight through where the new church location would be, the existing Circle K, that proposed development. There's a multi-residential driveway across the street, Hunter's Court, and the street across the street from it, and then you get right down to a blind curb. That's all within less than 300 meters. So there's a lot of egress, ingress points there that have a safety concern. So a traffic study may look at it and may say that that may not be an issue, but you haven't built a development in there yet. So you're just already going to exacerbate a problem by whatever goes in there. Clause 3 says, in keeping with the intent of relevant provisions and performance standards of the zoning bylaw. Based on the information that we were provided with at the January 16th meeting, this is a new lot going from institutional to RM2, as we realize it's not there. But the Town of Pelham zoning bylaw for an RM2 development permits it to be constructed to a maximum height of 15 meters or 50 feet, which is equivalent to 5 stories. As residents, we are concerned that this increased height will negatively impact on the privacy and enjoyment on the rear yards of neighboring properties. As a result, this is not in keeping with the intent of this zoning bylaw clause. Clause E says will not have a negative impact on the drainage patterns in the area. The consultant has indicated that they will be addressing that, but based on the information that we were provided, there is going to be an increase in storm runoff to adjacent residential properties. We don't want to be flooded, and that's the concern that we have. There will be parking lots that are going to be proposed for this, so again, we have that issue with that. The town needs to upgrade the existing stormwater plans. I asked the town, do you have any plans of doing that? Therefore, based on that, we have significant concerns that this proposed lot, by severing it, will have negative impacts on drainage. Finally, with regards to the town's official plan, section A2, goals and objectives, as part of the deliberations, we ask that this committee consider the following policy statements as outlined in Part A of the official plan, in particular, section A2, goals and objectives. The further policies there, under 8.2.3 is urban character, the goal of which it says is the plan is to protect and enhance the character of existing urban areas. The objectives here is to respect the character of existing development and ensure that all applications for developments are physically compatible with the character of the surrounding neighborhood. To maintain and enhance the character and stability of existing and well-established residential neighborhoods by ensuring that the development and redevelopment is compatible with the scale. As the proposed severance for this property, what would be there is not in keeping with that. All the residential properties located in this neighborhood are zoned either R1 or R2. As a result, a creation of this lot for the purposes of an RM2 development would not be in compliance with section 8.23 urban character of the town's official plan. On behalf of the residents of this area here, we ask that the concerns be noted and given favorable consideration by this Committee of Adjustment during your review and future consideration of application for this role. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Whitelaw. Are there any questions from the committee?
Yes, I do have a quick question for you, sir. How is the drainage situation currently? Obviously, there's a plot of land there now. Is anyone having any concerns with the land that's there today?
What's there right now is right now just a parking lot.
Right.
So any runoff or anything that you have from the church is more to the east end. So with a parking lot, everything just goes through now.
Okay.
Okay. You build up anything there, you put in what is, as part of what was proposed, is an asphalt parking lot, asphalt driveway in there. What's there right now would not, in our opinion, accommodate that. And you would have basically the swale that goes into that. We already have an existing swale that goes from our properties there, and it's not sufficient now. Anything else just exacerbates the problem.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kappa. Any other questions from the committee?
I have no questions, thank you.
I also don't have any questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Whitelaw, for coming out and for your correspondence as well. Who we go to next, Ms. Leach?
Thank you. Our next pre-registered speaker is Mr. Roman Shapoval. Is Roman in attendance? No? Okay, well, we can call on him again once we conclude. Therefore, Mr. Chair, you may now open the floor to the in-person gallery.
Okay, thank you. Well, we now invite anyone who's here in person who hasn't pre-registered. You're welcome to come up and provide any thoughts on this. Yes, come on up. And please start with your name. Thank you.
Thank you. Just please make sure to turn on the microphone. Oh, just the on button there. It'll turn red. No.
Oh, that's
Excellent, thank you.
Then it's red. Thank you very much. Natalie Didouch. I live at 21 Woodside Square, and I wanted to just reiterate from a very lived-in experience, let me say. I spoke once before, but what I didn't say originally was that we are one of the first tenants on that section of Woodside Square. If you're aware of Woodside Square, it is in fact a square. So I live on the side of Woodside Square that is closest to the Lutheran Church. And in fact, that very first point of contact, if you will, from that blind curve that we are all referring to. Now, you saw when the consultants had on the map, you saw just the beginnings of that curve. But let me tell you, it is indeed a blind curve. I can attest to this from 30 years of trying to exit safely from my street. And I have to also share with you that it was always a concern. Anybody speeding up a little bit, like I don't know how many times I had to slam on the brakes in trying to exit. Now with the Circle K, and I hope everybody takes this the right way, but we have younger consumers that like to frequent the Circle K, and thus younger drivers. And past that blind curve, you see a nice straight road. So it's so tempting to press that gas pedal. I was young myself. Anyhow, that's all. I just wish to speak to that particular point about the traffic hazard. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. Sorry, before you sit down, I should ask if there's any comments or questions from the committee.
No, not from me, thank you.
I have no questions, thank you.
No, okay. Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to speak to it? Please come on up, sir.
Good afternoon. My name's Dana Goldhawk. My wife Karen and I, we reside at 22 Woodside Square. And I just wanted to address very, very quickly, you posed a question about drainage, et cetera. Our lot has a sort of a drainage ditch that was probably built into the residential area 35 years ago when the development was made. Since that time, there's probably been a number of amendments made to property lines, et cetera. Our backyard will puddle up with anything more than a 10-minute rain. And it'll last, into the next day. This is every time, there are no exceptions. So there's already sort of a water concern where we live. The other issue, I respect very much that a traffic count has been done by professionals, but as a resident, I would like to sort of back up what was just said. We no longer feel safe pulling out of Woodside Square on our side of the residence. We take the horseshoe all the way around to the other side. And the reason is we cannot see beyond that curve. And so our car, or in my case also a truck, I oftentimes found myself having to pull right out into the intersection, only to hit my brakes hard when I see that somebody is coming along. And this is something that happens with regularity. So my wife and I are concerned that any addition in terms of the number of residents, numbers of cars, vehicles, and stuff in that area will only add to an already dicey situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. I'll just ask the committee as well if they have any questions for you, comments.
I have no questions. Thank you.
Yes.
No, I have no
Oh,
questions.
no
Thank
questions?
you.
Okay, good.
No questions,
Doesn't look
thanks.
like any. Thank you. Thank you for those comments. Anybody else? Yes, thank you. Come on up.
I think this is still on, yes. Hi, my name is Heather Carter. I live at 31 Woodside Square. And I also wanted to address a couple of things about this decision that you're making today. I know that you're not making a decision about the development, but there are some concerns, very serious concerns that the residents have about this area. It's been said that the ingress into the area is the gateway to into South Fonthill, and I'd like you to really consider that. It is a single lane of traffic going both ways. So, I mean, a single lane going in, a single lane going out. There is no room for a widening of the street. So the concerns that you've heard about the traffic are real serious concerns. I too have been a resident since 1993, so I'm one of the older residents there. The issue of that, of turning left off Woodside onto Welland, is very unsafe. And it's just going to get worse with any kind of development that takes place. We already know that the reason the church is selling the property is to gain, to generate income for the church. So we understand there will be a development there, and the traffic is a real concern. The area is an area in transition, as Mr. Highcoop said, and we would like you to really consider again the fact that this is a residential neighborhood that has existed now since the 1990s. That transition needs to be thought about very carefully. Anyway, those are my concerns. I just wanted to reiterate the concern about the traffic. It's a very serious concern. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that. Any comments, questions?
No, not at this time for me.
Very good. Thank you. Thanks for that comment, those comments. Is there anyone else in the gallery?
Hi, I'm Chris Fisher. I live at 7 Meadowbrook Lane with my wife Ann. I can verify that over the past 30 years since we've lived here, 2 of my vehicles have been involved in collisions at that intersection. In the morning, you get bright sun. So if you turn left off Woodside Square on the first side, where these residents live, you can't see anything. So you go on the second side of Woodside Square, you can get through, but when they come around the corner and you're stopped behind a school bus, the other vehicle was rear-ended. So that was before this development. It is a neighborhood. There is no sidewalks on South Pelham that join up towards town. So if you want to develop the neighborhood, add those sidewalks to the end, to the Circle K, because you left us out. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for those comments. Any comments or questions from the committee?
No, not for me, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Very good. Thank you. Is there anyone else in the gallery? Should we look online, Ms. Leach?
Through you, Mr. Chair, you may want to see if the applicant or agent has any responses to the comments heard this evening.
Sorry, before we do so, I was asking if there is anyone online who may wish to speak to this matter.
Not at this time, but I will check again before we close the public
Okay,
portion.
thank you. Yeah, I think I do like your suggestion, Ms. Leach, that we invite the applicant's agents to come back forward. So you may do so, and just while you're getting yourself settled, we heard comments about transportation, traffic, the intersections, comments about runoff and water, and I'm just highlighting some of them, but some of them that stuck with me. So if you could maybe speak to those two items at least, maybe we can go back to what BA has done and what the conclusions were as it relates to transportation around here. And also, if you could help me understand what the zoning is, what the existing zoning is, and what the zoning will be, whether or not a consent is granted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll have Mr. Heikoop deal with the zoning question. I will try and deal with the balance of the issues raised by the speakers. On the issue of traffic, a traffic impact study has been submitted. It's been reviewed by the town's staff, and they've accepted the report. That, again, will be an issue during the rezoning process, looking at the number of units. So this isn't the end of discussion. That will be an issue when the ultimate development is brought forward for approval. On the issue of drainage, one of the conditions is that there be an approved stormwater management plan that is a condition of approval. If the drainage is not properly dealt with, there will be no development on this parcel, simply put. If there are existing issues with the drainage, and I say this all the time in dealing with new development, if there is existing issues, those issues will be eliminated through the new development because a developer has no choice but to deal with stormwater management issues. So I would suggest to the neighbors that once a development proceeds on this property, they're better off than they currently are on the issue of drainage. The other two issues which Mr. Whitelaw referred to, which deal with compliance with the zoning bylaw and official plan, again, those are issues that are not relevant to the severance. The number of stories of height of any future development on this parcel, that remains to be determined and is not before you as a relevant issue, as well as the urban character of the property. Again, that will be determined at a future time through the rezoning process. I'll let Mr. Heikoop explain what can be built on this property today if the severance is approved, and what may be approved in the future for rezoning.
And sorry, just I had another question, Mr. Vac, and maybe you can think about this while Mr. Heikoop goes. Could you explain to the committee when you mentioned some things that will be coming next as part of the rezoning, could you share what that means, what's happening, and what will happen then when you speak to some of those approvals, and what happens through a rezoning and what happens through the site plan process as well?
Okay.
So appreciate some information on that. Thank you.
I'll try. So the town did pass a comprehensive zoning bylaw recently. So that is the current zoning for this parcel. A rezoning application was submitted prior to the comprehensive bylaw coming into force. There was a public meeting with the neighbors, and that matter is on hold right now. We're waiting comments back. So when that matter proceeds, I don't know. But if the developer wishes to build anything more than what is currently allowed on the property, and I'll let Mr. Heikoop define that for you. If they wish to build anything more than that, then they will need further approval. And that's when we get into the issues of compliance with the zoning bylaw, official plan, the issues that were raised by Mr. Whitelaw and the neighbors today. That's step one. Step two is site plan approval. So the fact that you have rezoning that allows a property doesn't mean that you can just go ahead and apply for a building permit. You need a site plan approval. Site plan is when staff gets into the minute details of a project. They look at lighting for the project. They look at drainage. They look at parking lot layouts, size of parking stalls. They look at the points of ingress and egress for the property. So that is the detailed process between architect, planner, and the town. That is a further approval that's needed. So we're not just talking about a severance, we're talking about a severance, a further approval to allow the density on the property, and in addition to that, a site plan process. So there's still many hurdles that need to be crossed, many finish lines to be crossed before you'll see development on this property.
Thank you. Yes, so thank you for that response. Mr. Heikup, so I'll just kind of repeat the earlier question I had, which is what is the zoning? What does it mean whether or not this consent is granted?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yes, so the existing zoning is institutional. Through the comprehensive bylaw, the institutional zone was actually updated from the 1987 bylaw, which was quite outdated. So right now, the institutional allows for a place of worship, a church or institution, that type of use, which the existing church facility is. But one of the things the new bylaw did is it actually brought in permissions for a standalone residential apartment building. So with our zoning application, we were seeking to increase the height, and we're seeking some site-specific provisions that were obviously deviating from the original institutional zoning because we were introducing that residential use. But then secondly, for the new institutional zoning, we were asking for some additional height and reduced setback. But that's kind of neither here nor there for this. We're dealing with the existing institutional zoning that allows the church and a 5-story apartment building. So just to circle back to Rocky's comments on the traffic report. So that traffic report was actually done for the proposed 6-story building. And so what a traffic report does is it takes the projected units or the proposed number of units and creates projections off of the historical data showing what the trip generation would be for that property. So we already understand with the proposal, the zoning proposal that's not part of this application, but that the existing roads have capacity to service that number of units. Additionally, there is commentary in there about the required sight lines. The existing driveway for the church today that would be moved, but that existing driveway is also the proposed driveway location for the redevelopment. So that's what driveway was reviewed by the traffic consultant. Further to the stormwater comments, as I indicated earlier, we're required to match our pre to post development flows. So most often when we do redevelopments and there's an existing issue, we design swales that are lower than the abutting areas. So the water actually, if it's pooling or ponding in a neighboring swale and goes over top of the edge of that swale, we have no choice but to accept that water, put it into our own storm system, and then our own storm system, because we have more impervious area, less permeable surface, we have to control the flow of the water coming off the property. Now, both Welland Road and now Pelham Street will have storm sewers on them. So we will be connecting our flows to a storm sewer catchment system, which will have an orifice on the end and will ultimately go through an oil grit separator. So we have the ability to take in those flows into that stormwater system, control them, and ensure that we're not flooding downstream sewers. So that process, those minute details will all be dealt with through a detailed design, engineering design, through the site plan approval process. And so ultimately, we can't get approval to move forward with anything until the Public Works Department has reviewed those grading plans, those stormwater reports, calculations, modeling, to ensure that we are not negatively impacting the downstream system. So I certainly am here for any follow-ups or greater detail should you ask it.
Thank you for that, Mr. Heikup. Those are my questions as it related to the issue, to the comments that were previously made. I'd invite Mr. Kappa, Ms. Stan to ask anything as well.
And I think you've answered all my questions. Thank you.
I do have one question or comment question for yourself. I noticed that, having the driveway now become part of a new parcel, there'll be a driveway for the existing lot, the church lot. That will be on South Pelham, correct?
No, that's incorrect. It'll actually be on Welland Road. It'll
As
be
well.
directly opposite the Circle K entrance.
Okay. Have you guys, as a team, considered a driveway or a piece of land to South Pelham, to provide like more than one exit? You know what I'm saying? For either the first property or the second property, the one that we're talking about today.
Well, the second property doesn't have frontage on Pelham Street, so that isn't a possibility, unfortunately, for that. We can certainly take things back and take a look at going to Pelham Street, but it is a regional road, and it's a higher order road. So generally, they are discouraged from putting driveways onto a higher order road if it can go on a lower order road. So that's the situation that we're in here, where we have an arterial road as Pelham Street, and Welland Road is the collector street. So with the alignment directly across the Circle K entrance, it's an acceptable distance from the intersection, from the corner, based on the traffic engineer's review and conclusions.
Okay, thank you. I just wondered if that was even considered, right, because of the situation with traffic. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Leach, is there anybody who has submitted comments by email that we haven't seen?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there has been no comments via email. May I suggest before we close that you call for any last comments from the floor?
Yeah, thank you. Good suggestion. Are there any last comments? I see a couple of hands up. Please come up, Mr. Whitelaw. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair and Committee. We've heard a lot of very valuable comments here in both pros and cons of this proposed severance. One of the comments that keeps coming back is with regards to the traffic study. The one thing that this committee needs to be aware of with regards to a traffic studies look at volumes and whether a particular roadway or allowance can accommodate that. So they look at types of traffic that use the road and all that. What they don't do is look at the actual safety things, which is the things that the residents in that have brought up to your attention there. So when the consultant is bringing to your attention there that a traffic study has been done and it says that there's no issues, they're looking at just whether this road can accommodate this additional traffic that will be as a part of this proposed development. So safety is the one thing that it's not particularly looking at. It's just looking at volumes, and that's it. With regards to when they're looking at drainage issues, I live on Hunter's Court, which is the other side of Woodside, so they're kind of like, it's a sandwich there. The development, the proposed development itself is at a higher grade than my swale. So the only way to address any runoff that's not caught by a storm drain or anything like that, you would actually have to lower the whole ground there or put some sort of a buffer that would be there to prevent that rain, unless you had a torrential rain or like that. As Mr. Goldhawk had mentioned as well, because he lives on Woodside, which is the back end of that, we get a lot of torrential rains there. The swale that I have already gets filled up, and as he mentioned there, it's usually a day before it goes down because of the fact that the residents downstream from me, as if I could use that, have blocked it. Now, it's not an issue we're dealing with here, but I'm saying, so you would have another source of that because it's at a higher grade. And there's not here to deal with on that. But you have to keep those two in mind. There's two sides to every story there. And the traffic study is the one there that's not dealing with the safety part of it, just volumes. And the drainage that they're talking about is you'd actually have to lower the whole ground to make sure that there wouldn't be any drainage issues. Laura, I apologize, I didn't catch his name there. When he's talking about we're not dealing with the official plan, that's exactly what this committee is doing, is you're looking at the official plan. The development here doesn't fit in with the official plan. Rightly or wrongly, we're dealing with the official plan that we have here right now, which says an RM2 does not fit in with an existing R1, R2. So I ask again that you keep that in mind. The consultant has confirmed what is going to be going in here from institutional, that height we're not dealing with. It's the development that's going to go in there. So we know he's confirmed that it's going to be RM2. It's the only RM2 that's in that particular area there, so it doesn't fit in. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for those comments. And I do want to give an opportunity for anybody else to come up and provide additional comments, but I would make a request as well, and that is to make your comments in relation to what we've already heard as well, so we don't have too much of the back and forth. But I do want to hear from anything that's come up since you may have spoken before. This committee would certainly like to hear that. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Murray Downey. I live on Michaela Crescent. And if I heard this right earlier, the traffic study only looked at the incremental increase for this development. It didn't look at all the development going on at the old arena site. It didn't look at all the development going on in Fenwick. There's the East Fenwick plan. It didn't look at all the new housing that's going in along Welland between Pelham and Fenwick. So it seems that just looking at the incremental increase isn't really looking at traffic on Welland Road. And I think if everybody who's tested here, traffic on that road has increased immensely in the last decade even. In fact, even the last 5 years, there's been a huge boom in traffic on that road. So you can't just look at one little piece and say it's only a little bit more cars, it's not going to hurt. And the other thing, Welland Road, it was a collector category road. It's not wide enough for 3 cars now. If any vehicle parks anywhere along that on Welland Road, you have to encroach on the cross center line to get by it. So I don't know how we're going to pretend that adding more traffic on there isn't going to create more hazards. That's it. I'm not going to talk about drainage. Any questions?
Thank you. Yeah, any questions? No, thank you. Please.
I guess through you, Mr. Chair, we're hearing a lot about this traffic study, and you have heard from residents who live for more than several decades now. So when I heard being referred to some historical data informing this traffic study, I find that very interesting, and I'd like to know whether this traffic study is available to us, the public, to see for ourselves how it was put together. I somehow would hope that history means that you're talking to people who have historical experience with an issue. It's not just talking about the future, it's talking about how things have been in the past, and we've had problems now for many years with that curve. So is there a way to find out whether this study is available for us to see?
I will turn that question to staff, to planning staff. Well, what is it available? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the traffic impact study was submitted as part of the zoning bylaw amendment application, and it is available and can be made available to anyone who requests it.
There you go. Thank you. Are there other new comments from the gallery? Sorry, comments related to previous comments. Come on up. Thank you.
I don't have a comment. I have a question. Why do you make bylaws? Why do you have a bylaw that addresses the height of a building, how it is zoned, And why, when you make a bylaw that states that there is a church there and that no building can be over a certain height, why are we even talking about this? Can any bylaw just be broken? Because in my experience, everything I have addressed to this town, I had my neighbor behind me build a structure that looks like a wall. And when the town came out, they said, oh, well, it's already up, so I guess it should stay there. It was not 10 feet from the fence. I look at this ugly board behind me, and there was no addressing anything. It was built. I don't know who has the authority to undo it or who gave the person, there was no, obviously he didn't get permission to put it up. So I have looked at that for 25 years. Now you're talking about putting a 6-story building in a spot that was zoned for a church. Why are we talking about rezoning something that had a purpose for the zoning? Is that correct? Was that zoned for a purpose? Like who made the law that that was a church zoning building? And why are we now going to rezone it?
I will do my best to try to answer some of that for you and provide some insight, but I don't think we caught your name, Miss.
My name's Ruth Dallas. I live on Meadowbrook Lane.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out, and I'll do my best to try to respond, and maybe we can hear from the applicant as well. And I don't know if you were here from the beginning of our meeting, but we were speaking about how what's before us, what's before this committee for today, is just the question of whether or not we can divide the property. That's the applicant. On the zoning application is going to come before council. And we've talked a bit about that. That's a separate process. That's not going to pass a zoning bylaw. Municipalities pass zoning bylaw to regulate land. The Planning Act deals with land and division of land, and land division happens all the time. We heard earlier today there was an application for an easement that required a land division on behalf of Bell Canada. So it's part of the process that land can be developed, or sorry, can be divided. And what we do as the committee is hear the rationale, hear the professional opinion, and make a decision in our view on whether or not that meets the conditions of the Planning Act, whether or not it fits based on a whole list of criteria and based on the comments we've received as well. So that's what our role is, and our role is separate from that of staff. Staff make recommendations to us, but we as a committee make a decision based on what the Planning Act says. So I hope that helps understand kind of what we're doing and what we're trying to achieve today.
I know this is not about what I'm talking about. You do realize, everybody who's sitting here, that this will be the skyscraper of Fonthill. If this building is allowed, this will be the highest building in all of Fonthill. It will be like building the CN.
May I add a couple comments? So yes, to your point, that is
That is
obviously
not your thing.
today.
so,
That's not
okay.
about today. And I just want to add another point about the bylaw situation. Sometimes it helps to get a reference point. Just like everyone in here is looking at this development, the same thing happened to the farmland of that neighborhood years ago. So for your home to be built where it has been built, someone had to come forward to change that land from farmland to a residential neighborhood. Okay,
But
so
the difference was the farmer probably won't all that.
no, regardless of, I just want to make a point, regardless of the that's when I moved to Fawn Hill, right?
I've been here since 90.
Yeah, So I guess keep in mind that your homes at one point were not there either. It was zoned a different land. We're trying our best, or the community is trying our best to make the right decisions, basically, right? So that is just to help you answer the question as to why why the bylaws are there and why they're changing. Not so much being broken, but changing, is because the needs of the community have changed.
You had invited so
mover to approve those minutes? I'll move.
Thank you. And a seconder?
I can second that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Move to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
I second that motion.
Thank you.
Thank you.